the energy blade stopped 3 centimeters from the human's throat. Commander Vex didn't flinch. He stood perfectly still in the training arena, sweat cutting tracks through the dust on his face, his chest rising and falling in controlled breaths. Around him, the Caltherian Royal Guard had frozen mid-drill, their crimson armor gleaming under the dome lights. The blade hummed, crackling with barely contained power, held steady by Lady Sharera, the Queen's own niece and newly appointed combat instructor. "Pathetic," Sharera said, her voice carrying across the silent arena. Her silver eyes narrowed with contempt. "Is this what humanity sends us? A warrior who cannot even anticipate a basic overhead strike?" Vex's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. His brown eyes remained fixed on some distant point beyond her shoulder. "Answer me, human." Shiara's blade didn't waver. "Or is cowardice bred into your species along with your weakness?" From the observation platform above, Queen Nalthira stood with her hands clasped behind her back, watching. She wore no crown, only the simple black robes of mourning she'd adopted since her mate's assassination 6 months prior. Her daughter, Princess Keela, stood beside her, small fingers gripping the railing, her young face tight with an emotion the Queen couldn't quite read. Vex finally spoke, his voice low and even. "I anticipated it, Lady Sharera. I chose not to counter." "Chose?" Shiara's laugh was sharp, mocking. "What warrior chooses defeat? One who understands the exercise." Vex's gaze shifted slightly, meeting hers for the first time. "You're testing response time and threat assessment. My mission here is to train your guard, not to humiliate my hosts by defeating their nobility in front of their troops." The arena went colder. Several guards exchanged glances. Shiara's face darkened. "You dare suggest I need you to show me mercy?" "I suggest nothing, Lady Sharera. I state what occurred." The blade pressed closer. A thin line of blood appeared on Vex's neck. "You insult me with your arrogance," Sharera hissed. "The Galactic Council sent you here because they believe humans have some special quality worth learning. I see nothing but a creature who hides behind false diplomacy and pretty words. You have no honor, no spine." "No, mother." Princess Keela's voice cut through the tension, high and clear. "Why is she allowed to hurt him?" Queen Nalthira placed a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder but said nothing, her eyes never leaving the scene below. Sharera lowered her blade slowly, her expression shifting from rage to something colder, more calculating. "This human claims to be a warrior. Claims his species earned their seat among the stars through strength. But I see only weakness wrapped in protocols and courtesies." She stepped back, deactivating her weapon. 3 cycles, Commander Vex. You have been here 3 cycles, and not once have you truly fought. You demonstrate. You instruct. You bow and scrape and smile. But you do not fight. Vex remained silent. "My aunt died defending this planet from the Kresh incursion," Sharera continued, her voice rising. "My cousins burned when their ship was ambushed. My brother lost his arm holding the northern gate. We bleed. We sacrifice. And the Council sends us you, a teacher who refuses to show us what you actually know, who treats us like children playing with training weapons." She spat at his feet. "You dishonor their memory by standing in their place." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the ambient hum of the arena's system seemed to quiet. Vex looked down at the spittle on the mat, then back up at Sharera. Something shifted in his expression, not anger, but something else. Something that made several of the older guards straighten unconsciously. "I understand," he said softly. He reached up and touched the collar of his armor. The magnetic seals hissed. The chest plate fell away, clattering on the mat. Then the arm guards. The leg plates. Each piece hit the ground with a heavy thump that echoed through the arena. Commander. One of the guards started, confused. What are you? But Vex kept removing armor until he stood in only the thin underlayer, his body covered in old scars that told stories the armor had hidden. A plasma burn across his ribs, a jagged line from shoulder to hip, marks from blades, claws, and weapons the Caltherians didn't even recognize. Shiara's expression flickered with uncertainty. Vex bent down and gathered his armor pieces, stacking them carefully. Then he straightened, turned, and walked toward the arena exit. Where do you go? Shiara demanded. We are not finished. Vex stopped but didn't turn around. We are, Lady Shiara. I was sent here to train warriors who wanted to learn, not to prove myself to people who have already decided what I am. His voice carried no heat, no anger, just a tired finality. I'll submit my resignation to the Queen tonight. You'll have a new instructor within the week. He continued walking. Coward! Shiara shouted after him. You run because you cannot face enough. Queen Nalthira's voice caught through the air like a blade of its own. She hadn't raised her volume, but every being in the arena heard her clearly. Vex paused again, his back still to them all. The Queen descended the platform stairs, each step measured and deliberate. Princess Keela followed close behind, her small face set with determination. When Nalthira reached the arena floor, she didn't approach Vex. Instead, she walked to where his armor lay stacked and knelt beside it. She picked up the chest plate, running her fingers over the scratches and dents that marked its surface. Commander Vex, she said quietly, I would hear your answer to one question before you go. Vex turned slowly, his expression carefully neutral. The Queen held his gaze. Why did you truly come here? The human warrior looked at her for a long moment. Then his eyes shifted to Princess Keela, who stared back at him with wide, questioning eyes. Because the council asked me to, he said finally. And because I have a daughter about her age back home who I hope grows up in a galaxy where species help each other survive. He paused. I thought I could help you prepare for what's coming. I was wrong. What is coming? Keela asked, stepping forward before her mother could stop her. Vex's expression softened slightly when he looked at the child. The war, Princess. The real one. The one your people haven't seen yet. His gaze shifted back to the Queen. Your Majesty knows. The Kresh were just the beginning, scouts testing your defenses. The main force is coming. Nalthira's face remained impassive, but her hand tightened slightly on the armor plate. How long? Intelligence estimates 6 months. Maybe less. The arena erupted in murmurs. Shiara's face went pale beneath her silver scales. You knew? Shiara whispered, looking at her queen. You knew and you said nothing? I knew, Nalthira confirmed, setting down the armor piece carefully. The Council shared their intelligence with all member worlds. That is why they sent their best instructors to each planet. That is why Commander Vex is here. She stood, brushing dust from her robes, and turned to face her niece fully. Tell me, Shiara, when you insulted the commander, when you pressed your blade to his throat and called him weak, did you notice how he stood? Shiara blinked, confused. He stood like prey awaiting slaughter. No, one of the older guards said suddenly, his voice rough with recognition. He stood like someone who had calculated 17 ways to disarm you and chose none of them. Nalthira nodded slowly. Captain Vryn speaks from experience, I see. He served in the Outer Rim conflicts, where he encountered human soldiers. She looked at her captain. Tell them what you told me when the Council first proposed sending Commander Vex. The old captain's mandibles clicked nervously. I said that if the Queen valued the safety of her guard, she should accept the humans' instruction. Because I have seen what humans do in battle. He paused. I have seen what they become when they remove their restraints. Vex's expression remained neutral, but something flickered behind his eyes. A memory, perhaps, or a warning. Stories, Shurera scoffed, though her voice had lost its earlier confidence. Human propaganda designed to inflate their reputation. Perhaps, the Queen said, or perhaps we should learn the truth. She turned to Vex. Commander, I formally request that you demonstrate your actual capabilities. Not as an instructor carefully measuring force for student safety, but as you would fight against an actual enemy. Vex shook his head slowly. Your Majesty, with respect, that's not possible in a training scenario. Why not? Because people would die. The words hung in the air, simple and absolute. Keela tugged her mother's robe. Mother, I don't understand. How can showing them how to fight be dangerous? Now Thyra looked down at her daughter, then back at the human warrior who stood unarmored and scarred before them. Because, my heart, there is a difference between teaching someone to survive and showing them how humans wage war. I still don't believe it, Shurera said, but her voice had lost its edge. You are one being, smaller than most of us. Your species has no natural weapons, no armor, no evolutionary advantages. You cannot possibly. The arena has combat drones. Vex interrupted quietly. Level 7 protocols. The kind you use for live-fire exercises with your elite units. The room went quiet again. Those drones are programmed to kill, Captain Vryn said slowly. They carry live ammunition. The only reason we survive the exercises is full armor and squad support. Vex's eyes found the Queen's. With your permission, Your Majesty, I'll run the level 7 gauntlet. Alone. Unarmored. If I survive, your people will understand why the Council sent me. If I don't, he shrugged slightly, you'll get that new instructor. Now Thyra studied him for a long moment. Around them, the arena had gone utterly silent. Even Shurera seemed stunned by the proposal. Keela, the Queen said softly, not taking her eyes off Vex. Return to the observation platform. But Mother, now. The princess hesitated, then obeyed, casting one last glance at the human warrior before climbing the stairs. Once her daughter was safely elevated, now Thyra spoke again. Captain Vryn, clear the arena floor. All personnel to the observation platform immediately. Activate medical teams and stand by. Your Majesty, Vryn said carefully, if we activate level 7 protocols, the drones will not stop until the target is eliminated or they are destroyed. There are no safeties. No emergency shutdowns. I am aware, Captain. The guards began moving, their boots echoing on the metal stairs. Shurera remained frozen on the arena floor, staring at Vex. You would truly do this? She asked quietly. Risk death to prove a point to someone who insulted you. Vex finally smiled, but it was a sad expression, weary beyond his years. No, Lady Shurera. I would do this to save your life. Because when the real enemy comes, if you haven't learned what I'm trying to teach you, you and everyone you love will die. And my daughter will grow up in a galaxy with one less species of friends. He walked to the center of the arena, his bare feet silent on the mat. I'm ready, Your Majesty. Now Thyra moved to the control console, her fingers hovering over the activation sequence. Commander Vex, the drones will deploy in 30 seconds. They will be armed with plasma rifles, shock nets, and blade attachments. They will coordinate their attacks and adapt to your responses. They will not stop. I understand. Forgive me, the Queen said softly, but I must know. For my people's sake, I must see what humanity truly is. I know, Vex replied. It's why I came here. Now Thyra pressed the activation key. Klaxons wailed. Red warning lights flooded the arena. And from 12 concealed ports in the walls, the combat drones emerged, their weapons already humming with lethal intent, their targeting lasers painting red dots across the human warrior's chest. Vex closed his eyes and took one deep breath. When he opened them again, everyone watching from the observation platform took an instinctive step backward, because the mild-mannered instructor was gone. In his place stood something else entirely, something ancient and primal that human evolution had wrapped in civilization, but never quite extinguished. The first drone fired. Vex moved. What happened next would be analyzed in Caltherian military academies for generations. Frame-by-frame breakdowns would be studied, debated, and used as the foundational examples in combat theory courses. But in the moment, to those watching in real time, it appeared less like fighting and more like watching a natural disaster tear through structured formations. The human didn't dodge the first plasma bolt so much as he was already gone from where it was aimed. He flowed left as the shot burned air where his torso had been, and his right hand snagged a piece of his discarded armor from the floor without looking. The chest plate spun through the air and struck the first drone's sensor array with perfect precision, blinding it. Two more drones opened fire simultaneously from different angles. Vex dropped flat, the bolts crossing above him, and swept his leg in a motion that somehow launched him back to his feet, while also sending a gauntlet piece skidding across the mat. It struck the wall at an exact angle, bouncing into the path of a drone's tracking laser, disrupting its targeting lock for the half-second Vex needed to close distance. The observers lost sight of him then. He moved through the drone's formations like water finding cracks in stone, always in the spaces between their firing solutions, always exactly where their coordination protocols predicted he wouldn't be. When he touched them, it was with brutal efficiency, a palm strike that knocked a weapon offline, an elbow that shattered a joint servo, a kick that sent one drone crashing into another with perfect timing to interrupt both their firing sequences. Impossible, Churera breathed. No organic being can process movement patterns that fast. But Captain Vryn, old enough to have seen things others hadn't, shook his head slowly. He's not processing. He's reacting. Humans don't think through combat like we do. They have something they call muscle memory. Their bodies learn patterns so deeply that conscious thought becomes irrelevant. Then, he has fought scenarios like this before. No, Bryn said quietly, his eyes never leaving the carnage below. He has fought things worse than this. The drones are predictable. They follow programmed behaviors. He's trained against enemies that adapt, improvise, and hate. A shock net deployed, expanding to cover a 4-meter radius. Vex grabbed the disabled drone he just struck and shoved it into the net's path, using the metal body as a shield while he rolled beneath another drone's firing line. As he came up, his hand found a severed weapon arm from an earlier casualty. He didn't even look before throwing it. The piece flew straight into another drone's propulsion unit, sending it spiraling into the wall. 6 drones down. 6 remaining, and their coordination protocols were adapting, creating overlapping fields of fire with no gaps. Vex stood in the center of the arena, chest heaving, blood running from a plasma graze on his shoulder, and a cut across his ribs where a blade had gotten closer than the others. He was grinning now, and the expression was terrifying, not cruel, not sadistic, but filled with an almost transcendent focus that suggested he had found something resembling peace in the absolute chaos surrounding him. The remaining drones fired simultaneously. Vex launched himself forward, directly at the concentrated barrage. Plasma bolts scorched the air around him. A blade attachment passed so close to his face that it cut his cheek. A shock net grazed his leg, sending muscle spasms through his calf that would have dropped most beings. He didn't slow. His shoulder struck the lead drone dead center, momentum, and precision combining to drive it backward into its support unit. Both machines tumbled, their coordination broken, and Vex's hands moved in a blur, ripping components, redirecting weapons, turning their own systems against them. One drone's plasma rifle discharged into another's power core. An explosion of sparks and shrapnel filled the arena. 4 drones left. They spread out, trying to establish crossfire again, but Vex was already moving. He feinted toward one, drawing its fire, then changed direction with a suddenness that seemed to violate physics. His foot connected with a piece of debris, launching it at another drone sensor cluster. The machine's targeting went haywire, its shots going wild, and one bolt struck a fellow drone by accident. 3 left. Vex's breathing was ragged now, his body showing the strain. The untreated plasma burn had spread, blistering the skin of his shoulder. The cut on his ribs was deeper than it had first appeared, blood soaking his underlayer. His leg dragged slightly from the shock net's effects. But his eyes remained clear, calculating, merciless. The drones tried something new. They stopped shooting. Instead, they rushed him simultaneously from 3 directions, blade attachments extended, attempting to use their superior numbers and metal bodies to pin and crush him. Vex didn't retreat. He picked his target, the center drone, and charged it directly. At the last possible second before collision, he dropped into a slide that carried him beneath its weapons. His hands grabbed its undercarriage, and he used its own forward momentum to flip it, sending it crashing into the drone coming from his left. The third drone adapted mid-strike, redirecting its blade toward where Vex would emerge from his slide. The calculation was perfect, the timing flawless. But Vex had already twisted, his body contorting in a way that traded the blade strike across his back for a glancing blow instead of a killing thrust. The wound was ugly, tearing through muscle, but not fatal. And it left him exactly where he needed to be, inside the drone's guard. His fist struck the machine's central processing unit, with the full force of his rotating body behind it. Something critical broke. The drone shuddered and went dark, crashing to the mat. 2 remaining. Both damaged, one missing part of its sensor array, the other operating on backup power after its main core was compromised. They didn't attack. They hovered, reassessing, their programming caught between the directive to eliminate the target and the recognition that their tactical situation had become untenable. Vex swayed on his feet, blood running freely from multiple wounds. His right eye was starting to swell shut from an impact nobody had seen him take. His hands trembled with exhaustion. "Commander," Queen Nalthira's voice came through the arena speakers, tight with control. "You have proven your point. I am shutting down the exercise." "No." Vex's voice was hoarse but firm. "They need to see how it ends. You are severely injured." "The remaining drones can be. They need to see how it ends, Your Majesty." Nalthira's finger hovered over the emergency shutdown. Princess Keela stood beside her, tears streaming down her young face, small hands pressed against the observation window. The 2 drones resumed their attack, moving with mechanical precision, attempting to exploit the human's obvious weakness. They separated, forcing him to divide his attention, and began a coordinated strike pattern designed to drain his remaining energy before delivering killing blows. Vex let them come. He defended in a way that looked increasingly desperate, blocks that barely connected, dodges that barely succeeded, retreats that suggested his strength was finally giving out. The drones pressed harder, their targeting algorithms registering the pattern of declining performance, calculating the optimal moment to overwhelm him. Then Vex stopped retreating. Between one heartbeat and the next, his apparent exhaustion vanished. The stumbling defense became fluid precision. He had been studying them, learning their adaptation patterns, waiting for them to commit to an attack strategy. His hand shot out and grabbed the damaged drone's blade attachment as it struck. The blade cut into his palm, but he held on, using the machine's own thrust to pull himself toward it. His other hand, formed into a rigid strike, hit the drone's exposed processor core with surgical accuracy. It died instantly. The final drone tried to retreat, to recalculate, to find a new approach. But it was alone now, damaged, and facing something its programming had no category for, a being that had allowed itself to be hurt in order to learn how to win. Vex didn't give it time. He moved with the last of his reserves, grabbed a piece of shattered drone casing from the floor, and hurled it with devastating accuracy. The impromptu projectile struck the final drone's primary stabilizer. It wobbled, lost altitude, and Vex was there when it came down, his knee striking its chassis with enough force to crack the reinforced housing. The drone sparked, sputtered, and went dark. Silence. Complete and absolute silence in the arena. Vex stood among the wreckage, blood dripping from a dozen wounds, body shaking with exhaustion, barely able to stay on his feet. He looked up at the observation platform, found Queen Althira's eyes, and gave a small nod. Then his legs gave out and he collapsed. The medical teams were already moving, streaming down the stairs with stretchers and equipment. But Althira reached him first, dropping to her knees beside his broken body, her royal composure finally cracking. "You fool," she whispered, hands hovering over his wounds, uncertain where to start. "You absolute fool. You could have died." Vex's eyes opened slightly. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. Had to show them what humans do. I saw what you do," Althira said, and there were tears on her face now. "I saw destruction and violence and no." Vex's hand, the one not cut to ribbons, reached up and gently caught her wrist. "You saw what we survive, what we endure, what we walk through." He coughed, blood flecking his lips. "To protect others." The medical team arrived, pushing the Queen aside with apologetic efficiency. They worked with practiced urgency, sealing wounds, stabilizing vitals, preparing him for transport. But before they lifted the stretcher, Princess Keela broke through the crowd. She ran to Vex's side, her small face fierce despite the tears. "You didn't leave," she said, her voice shaking. "And Shurera said you would run, but you didn't." Vex managed a weak smile. "Told you. I have a daughter. She'd be very disappointed if I ran." "Will you still teach us?" Keela asked. "Even after Aunt Shurera was mean?" The human's eyes shifted to where Shurera stood at the edge of the crowd, her face ashen, her earlier arrogance completely shattered. When he spoke, he addressed them all. "When the Kresh come in force, they will be worse than those drones. More of them. Smarter. Crueler. They will not stop until you are broken or dead." His voice grew stronger despite his condition. "But if you truly learn what I came to teach, you will survive. Not because you fight like humans, but because you understand what fighting costs, what it takes, what you are willing to endure to protect what matters." He looked back at Keela. "Yes, Princess. I will still teach you. All of you." The medical team lifted the stretcher. As they carried him away, the assembled Caltherian warriors stood in silence, looking at the destroyed drones, the blood on the floor, the scattered pieces of armor that had started the entire confrontation. Shurera moved to her queen's side, her voice hollow. I did not understand." "No," Althira said quietly, watching the medical team carry the human warrior away. "None of us did. That is precisely the problem he came here to solve." 3 days later, Commander Vex returned to the training arena. He moved stiffly, his torso wrapped in regenerative bandages, one arm still in a stabilization sling. The guards who had assembled for the morning session stood at attention, but there was something different in their bearing now. Not fear exactly, but a profound respect that hadn't existed before. Sharera waited at the center of the arena. She wore no weapons, no armor. When Vex approached, she dropped to her knees in the traditional Caltherian position of absolute apology, forehead touching the mat. "Commander Vex," she said, her voice clear but heavy with genuine remorse. "I insulted you, questioned your honor, and allowed my grief and pride to blind me to the gift you offered. I shamed myself, my family, and my people. I ask not for forgiveness, as I have not earned it, but for the opportunity to learn from the warrior I was too foolish to recognize." Vex stopped in front of her and was quiet for a long moment. Then, carefully, he knelt as well, his injuries making the movement awkward. "Lady Sharera," he said gently, "your aunt, your cousins, your brother, they died protecting this world from a threat they weren't prepared for. Your anger is righteous. Your grief is valid. You didn't insult me. You challenged me to prove I was worthy of standing where they fell." He paused. "In your position, I would have done the same." Shiara's head lifted, her silver eyes wide with surprise. "But," Vex continued, his voice firmer now, "if we are to prepare your people for what's coming, I need you to trust me. Not because I defeated training drones. Not because I survived a gauntlet. But because I am here for the same reason you are, to make sure fewer families have to mourn." He extended his uninjured hand. "Will you help me teach them?" Sharera stared at the offered hand, then took it. As he helped her to her feet, she noticed something. His grip was careful, controlled, nothing like the brutal efficiency she'd witnessed 3 days before. "You were holding back," she said quietly. "In the gauntlet. Even then, you were controlling how much force you used." Vex's expression became somber. "I destroyed 12 combat drones. If I hadn't held back, I would have destroyed the arena itself in the process. That's not something worth teaching. Control is." From the observation platform, Queen Nalthira watched with her daughter. Keela tugged her mother's sleeve. "Is he going to train Aunt Sharera too?" "I believe he is training all of us, little one," Nalthira replied, "teaching us that strength without wisdom is just violence, and violence without purpose is just destruction." "But he was so scary when he fought," Keela said softly. "He didn't look like the teacher anymore." Nalthira pulled her daughter close. "No, my heart. He looked like what he needed to be in that moment." That is perhaps the most important lesson, knowing not just how to fight, but when and why and what price you are willing to pay. Below, Vex had gathered the guards into formation. His voice carried across the arena, steady despite his injuries. "Today we begin actual combat training. Not the careful demonstrations I've shown you before, but the real techniques humans use in battle. I warn you now, some of you will be injured. All of you will be exhausted. The training will be harder than anything you've experienced." He paused, looking at each of them in turn. "But when the crash come, you will be ready. Not because you fight like humans, but because you understand what I learned a long time ago in wars you were fortunate enough to avoid. Survival isn't about being the strongest or the fastest or the most naturally gifted. It's about being willing to get back up one more time, then you get knocked down." Lady Sharera stepped forward. "And if we fall?" Vex smiled, and this time it was warm, the expression of the instructor they'd first met. "Then I pick you up. That's what teachers do. That's what warriors do for each other. That's what humanity learned after centuries of fighting ourselves nearly to extinction. We're stronger when we fight for each other than when we fight against each other." He turned to the queen on the observation platform and saluted in the human style, fist over heart. "With your permission, Your Majesty, we begin. Nalthira returned the salute in the Caltherian way, palm open toward the sky. Teach them well, Commander. And thank you for not walking away. Vex's smile widened slightly. I never intended to, Your Majesty. I just needed to remove my armor first. The training began. It was brutal, exhausting, and transformative. The guards learned not just techniques but philosophy, how humans thought about combat, about sacrifice, about the difference between dying for nothing and choosing to suffer for something that mattered. 5 months later, when the Kresh fleet arrived in force, the Caltherian defenders were ready. They didn't fight like humans. They fought like Caltherians who understood what humans had learned through millennia of warfare. They held the line not through superior firepower, but through superior will, refusing to break even when the odds seemed impossible. And when the battle was finally won, when the Kresh fleet lay in ruins and the planet's defenses held, Commander Vex stood on the walls beside Queen Nalthira, Lady Sharira, and Princess Keela, looking out at the victory they had earned together. Your daughter will grow up in that better galaxy, Nalthira said quietly. You helped ensure it. Vex nodded, but his expression was distant. For now. But there will be other threats. There always are. Then we will face them, Sharira said firmly. Together. The way you taught us. Princess Keela, now wearing the junior cadet uniform she'd insisted on earning, looked up at the human warrior who had become her teacher, her friend, and, in some ways, the uncle she'd never had. Will you stay? Keep teaching us? Vex looked down at the young princess, then out at the guards, who had become his students, his comrades, his family in all the ways that mattered. He thought of his own daughter back on Earth, growing up knowing her father was helping build something better. Yes, he said simply. I'll stay. Someone has to make sure you remember that the armor isn't what makes you strong. It's knowing when to take it off and keep walking forward anyway. And in the rebuilt training arena, where the scars of that first demonstration still marked the walls, new students began their lessons under the instruction of both human and Caltherian teachers, learning not just how to fight, but why, and for whom, and at what cost they were willing to defend the galaxy they all shared. Because in the end, that was what humanity had learned and what they now taught others. Strength means nothing without purpose, power means nothing without control, and survival means nothing if you stand alone.